Good morning. Welcome in. We have Jeff Duncan, longtime New Orleans Saints insider, columnist for 20 years with the Times-Picayune, and now with theathletic.com, and he just wrote the book, Peyton and Breeze, the men who built the greatest offense in NFL history. Jeff joins us live in the Bank Plus studio, but on the Modelo guest line. And one of the chapters in the book is the near divorce. And we've discussed this many a times on the show. But, all in all, the 15-year run or whatever it was, 16, was great between Breeze and Peyton and the Saints and everything else. But there's always going to be some ups and downs in a relationship. Talk about your chapter, The Near Divorce.
Well, there were two things that could have led to this marriage between Sean Payton and Drew Brees ending. Two things. One was Sean Payton leaving the Saints, which was a very real prospect back in the period of 2014 to 2016 when the team went through those 7 and 9 seasons. Sean Payton became very unhappy there. I think personally he was going through a divorce. There was just a lot of things going on in Sean Payton's life, and I think he was letting that Bill Parcells influence take over. And if Bill Parcells bounced around wherever he went.
Right.
He had a belief that you only stayed about 4 years, that your message would get worn, that you needed to kind of stick and move as a head coach. And I think that little message was in Sean Payton's ear, and he seriously looked at the Indianapolis Colts, the San Francisco 49ers, the Los Angeles Rams. These were all through back channel talks, nothing publicly. There were a lot of rumors that got out. But at that time, one of the reasons he was unhappy, this is a funny story, was he was unhappy with Mickey Loomis at that time taking on the responsibility of overseeing the basketball team, the New Orleans Hornets at the time. If you remember when Tom Benson bought the team, he incorporated in under the Saints umbrella the business operations.
Which I didn't think makes sense, but
didn't make sense. And Sean Payton, if you know him, he wants everyone rowing the boat at the same intensity as him. And he doesn't want his NFL general manager also having to deal, whether it's 5 minutes of his workday devoted to the basketball team, that's 5 minutes that they're losing as an edge on a competitor. That's the way Sean Payton felt about it. And he let Mickey Loomis know that. And there's a funny story about it. If you remember the NBA draft lottery. So it wasn't even the draft. It was the lottery where they determined the order of the teams.
Sure.
Well, this is right after Tom Benson had bought the Hornets, and he wanted to take Mickey Loomis and the rest of the basketball operations people up to New York to kind of brand the Hornets as the under the Benson umbrella. And so Mickey Loomis took that trip up to New York. That also happened to be the first weekend that Sean Payton was back on the field as coach after his season-long suspension for the Bounty Gate scandal.
So like OTAs or something?
Yes, like in May, I think it was, around that time, May, June. But he was going to be on the field, and his general manager was not with him. He was up in New York doing media ops for the NBA lottery. Well, Sean Payton, that did not sit well with him, and so he recruited his equipment manager, I think his personal assistant at the time, to go out in town and buy every ping pong ball that they could find at every sporting goods store, every department store, and they took them and poured them all in Mickey Loomis's office, in his desk drawers, all over his desk. So when he came back into town and opened up his office, there were ping pong balls everywhere. And Sean Payton told me while we were doing the interview for the book, he goes, I can still go in there and find a ping pong ball somewhere in his office.
So was Mickey Loomis, for our listeners, the general manager of the Saints, was he upset about that when he got back from New York?
I'm sure he was, yes. And they got through it. I mean, he knew that Sean Payton, how he felt. This was just Sean Payton's way of, that's, one of the nicknames Bill Parcells has for Sean Payton is Dennis the Menace. He's mischievous in a way, his personality. This was a perfect example of that.
Well, so the two men have, when you think about it, a great professional relationship that had ups and downs, but they were also willing to tell each other to go to hell and get past it, right? Where a lot of people can't do that. in a high pressure cooker, I don't care what industry, world, right?
I think you're spot on. I think they both realized they were better with each other. They would not. Mickey Loomis certainly realized he had a brilliant head coach in Sean Payton and was not going to find a better head coach if Sean Payton left. But he
would deal with the crazy.
Yes, he says that in the book, that if it comes down to me having a screaming match with Sean Payton, that's fine. If it comes down to that every year or so, we get into a fight, it's worth it to me because he's so brilliant in every other way. And they've had some. There's is documented in there about coming back from Seattle after a road game and Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis in front of the staff got it, and it was an ugly situation. And Mickey Loomis had to address it the next day, not only with Sean but with the staff. These things happen, but it's two highly competitive men in a high pressure situation trying to win at the highest level.
Right.
And that's what happens.
Jeff Duncan on the Out of Bounds show. All right, when you talk about that, the way that they were able to operate without having a strong owner that always wanted to manage it. In other words, from what you told us last night, the late Mr. Benson allowed them to do their thing through good and bad, work through whatever was going on, right? He wasn't a guy that was calling every other hour, getting an update on, Sean, what are you doing today? And Mickey Loomis, what are you doing today, right?
It's the anti-Jerry Jones in that regard.
Right.
He's not going to meddle, not going to... He ran his car dealerships the exact same way. Hired good people, let them do their job, expect results, demand results, but he's going to let you do your job. And Mickey Loomis has managed that as well as anyone ever in the organization.
And one thing Mr. Benson did before he, became ill was evidently not get in between them, right? He wasn't a pick sides guy. He thought the world probably of both of them and knew that they were in a pressure cooker and that they needed to work their stuff out, their challenges.
And I think Sean came to the realization after some soul searching that this was a really good situation in New Orleans.
Right.
That he had an owner that let him be the head coach and didn't meddle, that they had the resources to put a quality product on the field, and that he had a general manager that let him be who he was and have those idiosyncrasies that a lot of other general managers wouldn't. I think he came around to realizing he had a really good thing there, and not to mention a Hall of Fame quarterback that he'd be leaving. All those things, I think, coalesced. And off the field, I think he started to feel more comfortable in New Orleans, wanted to make it his home. He started dating his now fiancée, Skyleen Montgomery. That, I think, helped as well, kind of grounded him in New Orleans. And all those things came together at the right time. And then they got things fixed in the coaching staff. If you remember, they overhauled the entire defensive coaching staff after the 2016 season. They overhauled the scouting department in 2015. Once they got all that stuff righted, he felt really good about the direction of the organization.
And we've got about a minute here in this segment. Obviously, you're going to join us 9:30 on too. So who is bigger, though, in New Orleans? Sean Payton or Drew Brees?
Wow, that's a great question. I would say Drew Brees.
Okay.
I think Drew Brees is the greatest athlete in the history of Louisiana, and certainly in New Orleans for what he did off the field as well as on the field.
Right.
And he made people proud to be from New Orleans, proud to be Saints fans. The way he carried himself, he's senatorial, the way he presents himself. He's an ambassador for not only the organization, but the entire city and region in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, in the NFL. No, that's a good point. Jeff Duncan, new book, Payton and Brees, the men who built the greatest offense in NFL history. And Jeff was with the Times-Picayune for 20 years as a columnist, and now is with the athletic.com. More on his new book, Payton and Brees, the men who built the greatest offense in NFL history. And the show is brought to you by Bank Plus. It's more than a name, it's a promise.
Check us out.
Tom Luginbill on the Modelo guest line. He's joining us live from some kind of Cancun bar at his resort as he's getting ready for a fun day, hopefully at the beach. Hey, Lugs, we will shift gears and talk about something fun as far as college football recruiting. As you know, the Manning family is heavily tied to the state of Mississippi, and Archie from the Mississippi Delta played at Ole Miss. Eli played at Ole Miss, and Cooper Manning went to Ole Miss. Was going to play before an injury sidelined his career. And his son, Arch, in our opinion, will be the most high-profile recruit in the history of college football, and maybe impossible to top it, either forever or a long, long time. And without getting in the nuts and bolts of it, it's going to be fascinating. We had Jeff Duncan on the show yesterday. He's a New Orleans insider, had talked to Archie Manning the day driving up here to join us in studio. And he's dropping a piece on theathletic.com on Arch's recruitment. It'll be run the right way and on the up and up and all that stuff. But won't it be fascinating? And they say he's going to commit within about the next 12 months, May or June of next year, right, to get all their ducks in a row. Yeah. It is going to be fascinating to watch this, Luke, see where this goes.
Well, first of all, I think they're smart in taking their time. Right now, they know they have control over the process, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic, haven't been able to get on campuses, haven't been able to take any visits, which he couldn't do anyway at his age, but he could still unofficially attend camps and attend on-campus events. Hasn't been able to do that, so it buys him some time to set his own timetable. And to be honest with you, they need to do that. He's a 2023 kid. There is so much for him to explore, and he's going to get tugged in a lot of different directions. And to be honest with you, I feel for him. I mean, think about this. Equate it to the NFL draft, pre-draft process. Look at how many different ways people tried to scrutinize and destroy a Justin Fields or try and find red flags on a Trevor Lawrence. And, these are 21, 22-year-old young men going into professional football. Now, imagine what's on the horizon for Arch Manning as a kid. Right? With that last name, everything, I feel for him a little bit because you know what you want? You want him to actually be able to be a kid and have some fun and enjoy it and not have it be all about business and everybody tugging at him to do this article and this podcast and that radio show. And I think his support structure around him is probably going to be the best thing that comes about in all of this because they'll know when to taper it back. They'll know when to say, okay, maybe it's some time to, fill some people in on what our thoughts are right now. But
sure.
With him, there's no rush. See, well, that's where he's got the advantage. When you play quarterback and you're a really good player, which he is, you're a high-profile player, you hold, for the most part, you hold the cards in the process. It's not like a school is going to be able to say, hey, listen, we have a deadline date for you. Either you're in or you're out by this date. They're not going to do that. They're just not going to do it. And so unlike other positions that can do that and it works because, there's limited spots, with quarterbacks it's a bit different. So it is. It's going to be fascinating to watch it unfold. I don't think you're going to see as many previous relationships to Eli and Peyton play as big a role as they will with this.
I agree.
Because, David Cutcliffe's moved on, different place, a different generation. Obviously, you don't have a Phil Fulmer in the mix. I think it's going to be about new established relationships. And maybe most importantly, it's going to be about the right fit. So what's the right fit for the kid? Just because one Manning went here, another Manning went there, and another Manning went there, doesn't mean he's got to carve his own path too.
Tom Luginbill on the Out of Bounds show. We're talking Arch Manning this morning. Cooper Manning's son, Archie Manning's grandson, and Eli and Peyton's nephew, who will announce probably in about a year. And it will be just crazy as to where he's going. But as Luke's talked about, he now gets to get on the road June 1. Yeah. And Cooper and his wife and Arch will go out west. They're going to go to Southern Cal, Stanford, Texas. They've already been to Ole Miss many a times, Clemson and so on, Notre Dame. And his mom is a UVA grad, and he's at Newman, which is a private school. It'll be interesting to see how much, that factors in. But at the end of the day, Tom, and I could be off, I still think it's going to be a Texas, Ole Miss, Clemson thing. At the end of the day, there may be one other team, maybe Bama, but we were talking about this. Bama is almost too close to the heart Like, Ole Miss fans could somewhat handle Texas and Clemson, but when you play that team every year, and Archie had an epic battle with Bama when he was there. Eli beat Bama twice, I think, 01 and 02, or maybe 01 and 3, whatever it was. I just think the SEC West will be taken off. I don't think he's going to LSU. I think they'll never say it because they're class family. They would never allow their son/grandson to sign with that Ogeron. But so I think the West is off the table other than Ole Miss, because that would just be too much to overcome for kind of the home family fan base. Your thoughts?
But you know what? That's so unfair to the kid. That is so unfair to the family. This isn't, the 60s. This isn't the 90s. This isn't the early 2000s. This is a different kid who happens to have this last name, which, creates a lot of positives, but it also creates a lot of pressure. And he should be able to look at every option and not be scrutinized or lambasted for it because it makes a fan base jealous here or there or gets them upset here or there.
It's a great point.
Everybody that's a fan of college football and a fan of recruiting, don't ever lose perspective that we are talking about a 16-year-old, a 15-year-old. And think about it if it was your son or daughter, and you're wanting the best for them, the best situation. And the only way to do that is to block out all the noise. Because keep in mind, everybody that's got an opinion on this, whether it's on a message board, a podcast, a radio show, newspaper, print, they all have an opinion. Not one of them have a role in the decision, nor do they have to live the life.
True.
And I think that's something people just have got to remember that. And, to me, I think that, and I'm going to say this in relationship to Archie Manning. Archie Manning was a phenomenal player that had the unfortunate distinction of being on a horrible, horrible football team in professional football, okay? He knows better than anybody that if you're going to maximize your ability level and your opportunities to win at a championship level, you better pick a place that has championship level expectations, results, and personnel around you. And listen, not putting words in anybody's mouth, but I would be stunned if that's not a conversation that not only has already been had, but will continue to be had. Wherever you go, make sure the infrastructure around you is one that will not impede your ability level or your chances to succeed, but enhance it so that you have the greatest opportunity to achieve the goals that you want. That's hard to do when you're a high-profile, great player, and you decide to go to a place that maybe doesn't have great players across the board around you, and now all of a sudden maybe you're not the player that everybody thought you were to be. So, again, there's so many factors involved here, but I do think it's so important for people to have perspective here.
Yeah, but they won't. You know that.
They won't. I know they won't.
I mean, look, what you cover is people lose perspective. I've been doing this show in the heart of the SEC for almost 18 years. The one thing that makes people lose perspective more than anything else, Luke's, and all the stuff that we cover, is college football recruiting.
Sure, absolutely, and it's you're dealing with, and they're losing perspective over something that has such a low success rate from a projection standpoint that you have to, as a human with some rational thought, step back and go, why am I getting so worked up over it? You know what I'm saying? Let me think about it. This is what, and I share this with people all the time to actually, to try and provide more perspective. If you take a look, you've got, 130 some odd teams. They've all got 85 scholarships, roughly 25 a year. And you're asking a college program who's signing 25 kids a year that they started recruiting maybe when they were 14, 15 years old. They sign them when they're 17, and you're expecting every one of those kids to pan out, all right? If you're over 65%, you've probably done a pretty good job in this day and age, all right? That means you might miss on close to 10 guys, and then the question becomes, which 10 are they, okay?
Is this thing working? Give me some sound over here. Yeah.
The Out of Bounds Show is powered by the award-winning golf courses at Dancing Rabbit Golf Club in Philadelphia, Mississippi.
Good morning. Welcome in. Out of Bounds. 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. The Out of Bounds podcast you can find on Apple Podcast. Search the Out of Bounds show. We welcome in our friend, college football maniac, Dave Bartoo from the West Coast, Oregon Ducks alum, and Bartoo joins us on the Modelo guest line. He's fired up the Patreon account again, and you can follow Bartoo on Twitter at CFB Matrix. Bartoo, good morning, buddy. Let's start with Josh Heupel, who Ole Miss will play Tennessee this year. That's rare. East-West don't play enough. And Heupel is the new first-year head coach for Tennessee coming out of Central Florida. What do you have for us on Josh Heupel and the Tennessee Volunteers? On
the new hire in general, right? New hire in general.
Yeah.
So Heupel, I love the offensive side of it. Okay, so right away, just when you look at the play calling, he's been at two spots. The scoring efficiency has been very good at both of them. This is not a one-hit wonder. So from an offensive standpoint, I really like the hire. Head coach, you know something, it's really too soon to tell. You know, he's been a head coach for, 2-3 years? You know, nothing great, nothing terrible, just right in the middle. But if you're Tennessee, if you can keep your recruiting at number 14, where you've been for the last 21 years, with a great offense, and you can keep the players, and you can get average performance out of top 14 classes, you're going to be pretty good. You're going to be pretty darn good. So, don't really have a grade on the head coach side of it, but I do love the offensive side, and I think the offensive side is what's going to have to stir this drink, stir the Kool-Aid at Tennessee for a while, because the defensive coordinator side of it, I think the hire is bad. I think it's very, very subpar. I don't know how they came to the conclusion that the guy out of Penn State is the man to do it. It's his track record as a play caller. I just don't like this hire at all. So I think Tennessee is going to be a team that is going to be a pain in the butt offensively. First year, they've lost a lot of guys. Pruitt, like Muschamp, just ran this thing right into the dirt. You know, ran out of fuel, boom, plunges straight into a cornfield. So there's not a lot of anything to work on the first few years there. So it's going to take a while to turn this thing around. But I think with Tennessee, if you're going to be betting, bet the over, baby.
Ole Miss plays at Tennessee this year.
Yeah, that should just be 67-42, right? I mean, just crazy scoring in that football game. Unless Durkin can somehow miraculously turn it around. I didn't like the hire at the time, so I still don't like it. But Durkin is still, you look at his career, it's way better than what Tennessee has. And talent-wise, Ole Miss is better than Tennessee right now anyway. So without even looking at anything, I'll take Ole Miss to win and the over in that football game.
Let's go to Auburn. Mississippi State and Ole Miss play at Auburn this year. Mm-hmm. And Brian Harsin from Boise State takes over for Gus Malzahn. How do you like this hire?
Well, it's out with the old, in with the new. It's really kind of a 1-to-1 ratio, and in our opinion here, when you look at on paper, Brian Harsin and Gus Malzahn as head coaches are nearly the same guy. I mean, it's like they just went out and hired a carbon copy of Gus's career as a head coach, just that the guy was at Boise State over on the West Coast. You know, now if you're an Auburn fan, if you're saying, hey, look at all the wins he piled up and look at what he did out there, dude, Boise State is beyond the Alabama of that conference. Okay, Boise State recruits like a P5 team, and everybody else is a MAC team out there. So you should be winning all your games, not most of them, not a majority of them, freaking all of them. And he never really came close to that. I think he had one conference title in 4 or 5 years. So Again, above average. That's what Gus was. Gus was above average. Gus was just infuriating because the above average was a result of a bunch of good years and a bunch of really bad years, so we just might as well call it the Gus roller coaster. So maybe Brian isn't as up and down as Gus is, but overall, when you look at the body of work, really, really similar. What I think is not getting a lot of traction for Auburn, and a lot of people are talking about it, is Derek Mason. That is probably, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, that is probably the most intriguing hire in the West this year. Heupel being the most intriguing in the East, but Mason, a lot of folks out there probably see Derek Mason as the head coach of Vanderbilt. Didn't do a bad job, didn't do a good job, just people got tired of him losing games, and now it's up to a new guy to lose games. So whatever. But Derek Mason at Stanford was phenomenal. Just phenomenal. And it didn't matter what he went up against. It doesn't matter if it's a slow pace of play, if it's 100% RPO, any of that stuff. He was a fantastic defensive coordinator, and we saw some really good defense out of Vanderbilt programs almost every year. I mean, last year they almost beat A&M on defense. Everybody's like, A&M should be in the playoffs. Number one, no, they shouldn't, because their offense and defensive scoring efficiency, neither one was top 50, so they weren't that good. But I think Vanderbilt lost, 17-12 last year, to a coach that was going to get fired at the end of the year. So I think Auburn, this is, I don't know, what's the perception out there? Do a lot of people think Auburn's going to be bad this year?
Yes, or within reason of who they've been, which is, like you said, pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, but people think, what are people thinking? 6-6, 7-5.
Well,
5-7?
yeah, I would think 7-5.
Man, so see, I think Auburn's going to be just a wicked trap game. If you don't bring your A offense, now I don't know how long. I mean, it's his first year, so. But I really like Derek Mason, and I think anybody underestimating Auburn, especially defensively, if you're looking ahead to the next game, and in the SEC, in conference games, you can't do that. You can't. And while I don't think the offense is going to be anything to write home about for Auburn, I think the defense could pose a huge problem for teams week in and week out.
Hey, by the way, Auburn scheduled a game with Penn State at Penn State, third game of the season.
When?
For this year.
For this year?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Dude, I don't.
That's a terrible schedule for game for both, but I just wanted to let you know that the third game of the year, they have to go to Happy Valley.
Yeah, that'll be fun, and that will be an absolute. You want to talk about freaking great minds? You got the defensive coordinator of Auburn going up against the new offensive coordinator at Penn State, who in 1 year took Texas to the number 11 scoring efficiency last year. I'll take Penn State at home, just simply on the offensive side of it.
Right.
But that's a fun football game. It really is. Well, why these teams schedule these things in this era of the playoffs, I don't know. But cool, awesome. Somebody's going to get eliminated from the discussion in the first month, which is great. Why play fun top 25 games at the end of the season when you can just eliminate that in the second week of September? Well,
how bad of scheduling is Georgia and Clemson playing each other week one of the season when they don't have to. Bartoo.
Morons. I mean, seriously, this is dumb. Okay, I mean, it's almost infuriating, And I get it from a fan perspective. It's cool, it's awesome. All right, but let's take a look at real quick. I'll sidebar this. You're Georgia, okay? You're the athletic director at Georgia. Your program is the only one that is top 10 in recruiting and top 10 in draft picks in the last 20 years without a national title. The only one, Okay? Do you need a stronger schedule than playing the SEC? No, we have shown that. Do you need to win tough games non-conference to get in the playoffs from the SEC? No. What are your odds of losing to Clemson versus South Carolina State? Like a million times worse. Why are you doing this? I mean, it's just, to me, if you're the AD at Georgia, you're trying to win a national title, and the tougher you make the road, the worse your odds. So, personally, yeah, if he was standing right in front of me, I'd say this is stupid. This is the wrong time to do it. Maybe wait till the playoffs change and this becomes an important game to get in or out, but right now, stupid.
Well, another one, Dave Bartoo on the Modelo guest line, Alabama and Miami. Why would Miami schedule that knowing that Manny Diaz is somewhat on the ropes? They recruit really well for the ACC. They're trying, you want a guy to work rather than have to make a change, and yet you're going to play Bama on a neutral field to start the year, and you don't have to. Okay?
No, and the difference in this, look, Miami might be good, right? I mean, Miami could lose this football game and end up 8-4, 9-3, borderline top 25. This is kind of when I consulted, the first program I ever consulted for on scheduling, purely on scheduling, this kind of scenario came up because the athletic director wanted to do a home-and-home with LSU. And my perspective was, look, you play that game at this point in your program, you're probably going 0 for 2. Okay, you're probably going 0 for 2. At best, 1-1. At best, and it probably wouldn't happen. And you're trying to build your program back up. Your program's down. It used to be a top 20, top 15 program. What you need is top 25. You need to be in the discussion. You need to be a top 25 team. And if you lose that game early to LSU, and it's the same thing with Miami, you lose that game early to Alabama, how much harder is it to climb back in the top 25 quickly?
Right.
It's a lot harder, right? You want, if you want to recruit, you want your brand out there. You want to go 4-0 in September, right? You want to be top, even if you're overrated. Who cares if you're overrated, okay? Are they talking about you? Yes. Cool. That's what we're trying to get, because we're trying to build up recruiting so down the road when we play LSU or play Alabama, it's for something. Winning that game, winning either one of those games against LSU right now isn't really going to help as much as just winning a lot of football games. So don't do it. Now, they turned down LSU. LSU went the very next week, scheduled Syracuse. Syracuse went 0-2 against LSU. And the team that wanted to play LSU scheduled somebody else, went 2-0. The very year they were supposed to play LSU, they went 9-3. They finished in the top 25. People started talking about them. If they'd lost that LSU game, they'd have been 8-4 and out of the top 25. So from a Miami perspective, you're trying to build up a once great program. That's about wins. That's about being in front of people. That's about people talking about the U in Miami. And you want to be in that top 25. And getting your ass handed to you by Alabama, likely, how does that help you accomplish your goals? I don't see it.
We'll keep moving on with Dave Bartoo at CFB Matrix on Twitter. We discussed Josh Heupel at Tennessee, new coach. Brian Harsin at Auburn, new coach. Now we'll go to Shane Beamer, new coach at South Carolina, who took Will Muschamp's place. What do you make of Beamer? What do you make of the Ray Tanner hire of Shane Beamer in Columbia, South Carolina?
Well, I mean, Ray already botched the Will Muschamp one, and we all called it the minute he hired him. So now you have Shane in there. Shane has zero head. Could you imagine? I mean, seriously, if I came on your show and said, hey, a top 20 recruiter in college football has an opening and their top guy doesn't have any head coaching experience. Doesn't matter who it is, right? I mean, could you imagine, could you imagine John Cohen going out and going, hey, I'm going to hire this guy with zero head coaching experience? What would the fan backlash be?
Well, and look, look,
Right?
Bartoo, he somewhat did that. I mean, Moorhead had made the run at Fordham or whatever it was called, and there is something to that, and he had a great record. But we got to see it up close, even though Joe had run that program and done more with less, because there's no money in that program, and you have to do way more than be the head coach. Just the training, dude, in this league, there are so few Dan Mullins who can come in with especially at a non-blue blood, who can come in at a program and have never been a head coach, Dave, and actually turn 7, 8, 9, and 10 winning seasons at what I would call the second tier in the league outside that big six that we always talk about.
Well, and it's not just, I guess I should expand on it. It's not just in no head coaching experience. It's also no play calling experience.
Yes.
No offense, no defense, no nothing. I mean, it is, if it works out, great. He's Nostradamus of college football for one hire. But to me, with what happened with Muschamp, to take this kind of risk was astounding. I'm still baffled by it. I hope Shane's successful. I hope everybody's successful because, I mean, nobody likes to see people fired. We like college football to be better and competitive. And, part of my job on the analytics side is trying to make college football better with the numbers, find better hires, find better coaches. But this one was baffling, at best. Now, the hire that he made that was very, very good, I think very under the radar. I love Clayton White out of Western Kentucky. That was a defensive coordinator at Western Kentucky, and he has done a very good job there. I think the ceiling for Clayton White is extremely high. So that part of it, I really like. Let's get away from all the negatives. That is very, very, very positive. In fact, if you take Josh Heupel and Clayton White, that would be a badass pairing right there. I would love that. But on the flip side, he went and hired Satterfield out of, I think, Carolina Panthers, if memory serves me correctly. And his ability to call plays in the FBS level, to put it nicely, is very subpar. So, for the next couple of years, it is no longer the South Carolina Gamecocks. It is going to be South Carolina 1st to 24s. That's what we're going to go with. All right? Good defense, no offense. Tennessee is the polar opposite. Great offense, no defense. So, but I really so we're going to have to track this. Okay, I'm going to put a pin on the board for you right now. All right? How many games South Carolina wins giving up more than 24 points? I'm going to go 0. Okay, I'm going to call the ball on that. I just don't think the offense is going to be there, and they're going to try to have to win. This is going to be Vanderbilt of the last few years. Just win it on defense.
It's who they've been under Muschamp. Try to hold people, and not, he never could get the offense up and running. Bartoo.
Dude, no, that's not true. Do you know how utter garbage his defense was the last few years? Dude, he had like the 100, in my numbers, he had like the 128th defense in the country last year. I mean, dude,
last year. Okay.
That's for MAC programs. But, I mean, and I know some people listening go, well, that was just 1 year. Dude, bottom 10 out of 130, and you're a top 20 recruiter? Are you freaking kidding me? That tells me the culture, the performance X's and O's culture was terrible at South Carolina. I mean, the hole that Will dug offensively and defensively, the lack of coaching football there is astounding. That program is just a shell, an absolute hollow shell of what it was under Spurrier.
Dave Bartoo on the Out of Bounds show, talking SEC college football on the Modelo guest line. All right, let's hit this real quick. Vanderbilt hired Clark Lee because Ole Miss plays them every year, and this is a crazy year where Mississippi State plays them too. The hire at Vandy, Dave.
Yeah, it should be easy W's for both teams. Well, no, I mean let's just be serious. I mean, come on, you're talking about the worst recruiter in the conference by far. Okay, I mean this is like Arizona in the Pac-12. This is Illinois in the Big Ten. This is what in the ACC? Half of the teams at the bottom, you know. So I mean, Clark. Look, they had him circled from day one. That was their guy right out of the chute. No ifs, ands, or buts. It was really predetermined, in my opinion, that was the direction they're going. If Clark wanted the job, he's a former Vanderbilt guy, young dude, lots of energy. I get it, and he's a good defensive mind overall. But again, it's his first head coaching job, so we don't know where it's. I don't know how to grade this. Because he doesn't have any experience. But if you're a Mississippi State and an Ole Miss fan, cool. We're going up against somebody that has zero expectations, doesn't have a lot of talent. I believe from the coaching standpoint, Ole Miss should simply outscore them. And Mississippi State, the defense last year was very good, all things considered, and I expect the offense to be turned around in year number 2 under Mike. So I think that's great to have on the schedule, you know. So we'll see where Clark goes with this. I think it's. I don't think you can grade it right now because there's nothing good or bad about it. Most of the moves he's made have been very, very neutral, and we just got to wait and see.
Let's go outside the league real quick. Steve Sarkisian, Texas hires him. He did a great job at Alabama. It looks like the rehab stint, both, but the coaching stint worked out, and it looks like he's got his stuff together in his personal life off the field. Mm-hmm. What do you see with the Texas hire with Sarkisian?
Well, with anybody that Texas hires, I think the first thing you got to realize is that everybody has struggled since the national championship going through Texas. Right? It doesn't matter who it is. Once that national championship was won, Mac Brown struggled. Then Charlie Strong struggled. Then who's the last guy? Can't even remember. I can see his face.
Tom Herman.
Yeah, Herman. Herman struggled, you know. And so if Sarkisian struggles, to me it reminds me a lot of UCLA, Tennessee, and Michigan, in that a once really good program, no matter who comes in, is struggling. Okay, it doesn't matter. I mean, we're on guy 3, 4, 5 since Fulmer's national champion. Michigan's on guy 3, 4, 5 since Michigan's best head coach ever won a national championship, Lloyd Carr. So Texas is kind of looking at the same thing. At some point, like if Sarkisian doesn't succeed, when are these programs going to start looking in the mirror and going, dude, it's an off-the-field problem. What is wrong? Why can't we get this together? Because we have every advantage. We got the money, we got the location, we got the recruiting, we got the brand, we got the fan base, we got the stadium, we got it all. We got the Horns Network, baby. Why can't we put this together? So, but from a perspective of Sarkisian as a head coach, I don't know where this is going to go. Look, he underperformed at USC. He underperformed at Washington. Whether that was the drinking or not, I have no idea. But it was an underperformance of about a game or two a year. That's kind of what Herman did. So Texas doesn't want that. But on the flip side, offensive coordinator, he's very good. He always has been a very, very good play caller. And defensive coordinator, look, back out in your area, I say Pete Kwiatkowski, and you go who?